Aoife Johnson just over a year ago in UHL, another 16-year-old girl. Obviously there needs to be, and I think there is going to be, an investigation into the particular circumstances of her death. But on the face of it, and from what the HSE said about the death of Aoife Johnson, it's difficult to avoid the partial conclusion that this relates to the issue of overcrowding. It relates to the issue of people being on trolleys, and will point to the needs for investment in our health service as opposed to the recruitment freeze that the government is embarking on while trying to pretend they're not doing a recruitment freeze at the same time. A second health issue, which is going to be a major issue in the Dáil this week, is the absolute scandal of how children with scoliosis are treated in this state, waiting years for necessary operations. There's a motion before the Dáil tonight which calls for the establishment of a task force, which we will be supporting. Obviously it was parliamentary questions by myself, as well as reporting by the Ditch, that revealed, the horrendous scandal of non-medical grade, non-authorised springs being inserted into children by one particular surgeon at Temple Street. That is obviously that's subject to investigation, but if the allegations are accurate, then that's obviously a very, very serious failure by that surgeon. However, there are broader institutional issues here very, very clearly. The fact that that was able to happen in and of itself on a number of occasions is an institutional failure, but also the fact that now it appears that with one surgeon taken out of the picture at the moment while the investigation goes on, the waiting lists have gotten longer and longer, that you have a kind of institutional reliance on this one surgeon to perform the most complex surgeries, which arise quite regularly in terms of scoliosis. That is a failure for which responsibility lies with the CHI, and the government now needs to act. We cannot continue to put children and their families through these horrendous this torture and these horrendously long waiting periods. It's completely unacceptable. Just finally, I want to speak about something that happened in my constituency in Tallaght last Thursday, where Dr. Umar Al-Qadri, he's the chair of the Muslim Peace and Integration Council in Ireland, was attacked in what seems to be a premeditated racist assault in Tallaght, where he was effectively lured into a housing estate and set upon with nothing being robbed and just physically attacked. He certainly seems to have been targeted because of who he is, because he is a prominent Muslim in this country. That is just horrific. The people who perpetrated that attack, we don't know where they came from, but they do not represent Tallaght. In fact, Tallaght is represented by the multiple people in the housing estate who saw what was going on, who came out to intervene to stop it and ensure that he went to hospital. It's also reflected and represented by the rally that we had last night in Tallaght, called by Lekela, where people came out to say Tallaght says no to racist violence, to oppose these kind of attacks happening in our community, but also to oppose the kind of rising tide of racism, of hatred, of division, of lies told by the far right, which inevitably in their wake will have a rise, if successful, in racist assaults. They embolden people who might feel inclined to engage in these sort of attacks. So I think it's absolutely essential that all those people in society who are opposed to this, who want to take a stand against it, do so and come together. That's going to happen in a massive way, hopefully with tens of thousands of people on the streets, like we saw last year with Ireland for All, on Saturday the 2nd of March, in a demonstration, a solidarity march, which has been called under the banner of Stand Together. The idea that we need to stand together against racism, against hatred, against division, against war, but also stand together to fight for housing, for healthcare, for rights for all people, and to point out that we need to share the wealth in this society, that Ireland is an enormously wealthy country, that we do not need to have a housing crisis, we don't need to have a health crisis. The reason for these crises is not because of asylum seekers, is not because of migrants, because of policies pursued by the government in the interest of those who benefit from those crises, the profiteers in terms of the health industry and the corporate landlords and private developers. So that's Saturday, 2nd of March. Over 100 organisations have now signed up to support that at 1:30 p.m. at Parnell Square.
So yeah, I just want to make 2 points here. One on the issue of Palestine, and one on the issue of an industrial action which starts today. So you're all well aware that the Taoiseach is due in Washington March 17th. Plans to give a bowl of shamrock to the US President Joe Biden as part of a day of celebration. You're also aware of the fact that there have been calls, which we fully support, that the Taoiseach not go to Washington on the 17th, given that Joe Biden is, the number one key player in terms of arming the Israeli state, in terms of financing the Israeli state, who are conducting a genocidal campaign against people in Gaza. Just want to bring to the attention of the media comments that were made the other day which have some bearing on this. There were comments made by a member of Israel's war cabinet, Benny Gantz, who issued an ultimatum and said that unless all the hostages were returned by Ramadan, that there would be an Israeli offensive into the city of Rafah. As you know, Rafah has a population now of about 1.5 million, perhaps a majority living in tents, having fled from elsewhere in Gaza. The date that member of the Israeli War Cabinet is giving is March the 10th or March the 11th. So in other words, there is a real possibility now that what could very well be the most bloody development in this war will commence and get underway precisely as leading Irish politicians are packing their bags and getting ready to head for the plains to go over to Washington. We're opposed to that visit, whether the Israeli Defence Forces go into Rafah or not. But there is a real possibility now that the Taoiseach's visit to the White House to celebrate with Joe Biden will coincide with what may be the bloodiest stage in this genocidal campaign, and it's a point that we would like the media to note. I think it really strengthens the call for that trip not to go ahead. The other point that I want to make just briefly is that industrial action starts today in the technological universities. We had a ballot of TUI members, more than 90% in favour of action up to including strike action. The issue here is variation in rates of pay and conditions on a geographical basis, which flies in the face of the agreement that the union and trade unionists made 6 or 7 years back. And the government, today's action will not affect student services, but it is the beginning of an important campaign of action, and the government would do well to note it. And they should intervene before it escalates and it starts affecting students' classes and the like. Right is on the side of the lecturers who are taking the action today, and it's an important development which we're aiming to get a Dáil debate on tonight under topical issues.
Okay, just two brief points. First of all, in relation to the RTE situation, I think the point that we want to make really is that the revelations about the extent of payouts to executives and the lack of transparency around those payouts for people who made terrible decisions that cost millions or who were involved in the governance of RT when absolutely obscene salaries were being paid out, when we had barter accounts and so on. The revelations about these payouts and the lack of transparency around these payouts is really stomach churning for ordinary RTE workers who are looking down the barrel of up to 400 redundancies, where we had many workers in RT who were victims of bogus self-employment, and indeed where the net result of the terrible mistakes of some of the people who are getting these big payouts or got these payouts may mean the suppression of hundreds of jobs, and where those jobs will end up being outsourced and being far more precarious, of far lower quality. So exactly what shouldn't have happened in RTE is happening. In other words, ordinary workers and the quality of public service broadcasting are going to be the losers, while top executives walk off with massive salaries, and we don't even have full disclosure about the details of those salaries, why they got them, and so on. So for us, it's just yet another reason why we need a radical overhaul of the entire governance of RTE, and we have to break the connection with commercial advertising that we think was the corrosive and corrupting influence on public service broadcasting, because instead of being an institution that was based on serving the needs of the public, it increasingly began to mimic what was going on in the corporate and commercial sector and the excessive obscene salaries that you get in the commercial sector. So it's the reason why we need to have radical reform, to have direct exchequer funding, caps on salaries, and break the link with commercial advertising, which has been so corrosive and corrupting of what is a vitally important service, public service broadcasting. The other thing I just want to briefly comment is because it underlines the Children's Rights Alliance scorecard for the government's performance in terms of the treatment and welfare of children in this country underlines a point that we have been making for a very long time, but we are really trying to bring the government's attention to, which is family homelessness is continuing to spiral out of control. So we have record numbers of children now, over 4,000 children who are homeless. The number of families with children that are homeless is increasing steadily. The Children's Rights Alliance have rightly given the government a D- in terms of their performance in addressing child and family homelessness. But what we want to say is that this is a result of the government's failure to address the problem of private developers only building, or largely only building, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. We were criticised often for objecting to or putting in submissions on private developments, but one of the major reasons we did so was because they were completely dominated by 1 and 2 bedroom apartments rather than having 3 and 4 bedrooms, because the private developers maximise their profits by only building 1 and 2 bedroom and not building family accommodation. And of course the state itself has failed to build family accommodation. So although there is some headway being made in the delivery of housing for 1 and 2 bedroom households, the failure of private and public to build 3 and 4 bedroom is now leading to a massive crisis in this area. So there needs to be a radical shift in policy to demand that there are more 3 and 4 bedrooms built by private developers, that the state itself builds more 3 and 4 bedroom developments, and in the immediate short term the state needs to step in and buy 3 and 4 bedroom developments, because those families, to give you an example, yesterday I was dealing with a family of 7 people, several of whom were ill, and the only accommodation they're being offered is a 1 bedroom in a hostel. 7 people, right? And this is commonplace now. So this is absolutely dire for the families involved, for the mental health of the children, for the stigma those children suffer, and this is absolutely widespread now. So that as a matter of urgency, the government have to address the massive shortage of 3 and 4 bedroom housing units, because otherwise the family and child homelessness crisis is going to continue to spiral.
Paul, could I just ask you about the Limerick story? Yeah. What exactly are you looking for in terms of this teenager's death? Just more detail and clarity?
Yeah, well, an investigation has been started into it, so that's welcome. That needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be independent. I presume it will be all of those things. But it is, if you read what the HSE said in the context of Aoife Johnson's tragic death, they were very clear that this is relating to overcrowding, relating to too many patients being on trolleys, relating to trolleys being in the resuscitation area. And so it seems to me that there's a fundamental issue here in terms of our health service, which relates to UHL in particular, but our health service in general, that fundamentally it's an issue of capacity in our health service, is that where you have overcrowded hospitals are dangerous. The chances of tragedies like this happening go up very, very significantly when you have people on trolleys, when you have overcrowding, and that is something very clearly that the government needs to deal with.
Okay, that's what I need.
Thank you.